It's so hard when you get paralyzed by your negative thoughts, perfectionism, and self doubt. Trust me, I've been there. I know what it's like. These are the things that you need to understand to stop letting them hold you back. All right, let's jump in. So, this first one is that you forget that your worries, all the things your mind said, the negative thoughts, the doom and gloom are actually not happening right now in this moment, right? It's the difference between thinking, I can have the thought of a chocolate chip cookie and I can imagine it and I can even imagine what it tastes like, but it doesn't actually mean that the chocolate chip cookie is here. I'm just thinking about the chocolate chip cookie, right? It's not actually present in this moment. Same thing. I can imagine and think about all the ways things can go wrong when I'm going to make a decision, I'm going to put myself out there, but that doesn't actually mean that it's my reality in this moment. So this first piece is not acknowledging that your worries are just thoughts. They can come and go and that you don't actually have to listen to them, right? We can have a worry, we can think about it, and then we can decide, is it helpful for me to listen to this worry? This next one is that you don't recognize when perfectionism is showing up and keeping you stuck. So this perfectionism was when you have these really high standards for yourself. You can be really inflexible, highly self-critical. You do a lot of things to avoid failure. All these different things can show up in making you feel less than, making you doubt yourself, and more so in making you paralyzed. So that's a really thing I noticed with perfectionism. It's not only that at times it can push you to go above and beyond and burn out, it can also show up in these really sneaky ways where it keeps you stuck and paralyzed. You're afraid to make a wrong move, or you just have to get it perfect or right before you do something, right? So it keeps you stuck in action. So that's a way that perfectionism is showing up and making you feel less than. If you don't recognize the role that perfectionism is showing up in your life, then you're just going to keep getting stuck in this rigged game because you don't even realize that the game's rigged, right? Because once you hit an achievement or you do something, the rules change and now it's different. So unburied, if you're really confident about yourself, is that you really get stuck in doubting yourself, and this indecision really plagues you constantly. And it can be with small decisions or big decisions. And one thing that's really important with this is acknowledging that inaction is a choice. When we don't make a decision, that's a decision in and of itself. And that's really important because a lot of times we can get stuck in this back and forth. Should I do this? Should I not do this? Right? What's the best outcome? What's the perfect? What if it shows up this way? Right? And I'm saying it really fast because it feels like exhausting and overwhelming. And then we just default to like not doing anything. And that's a choice. I want you to really acknowledge that in action and how that's not helpful, right? Obviously, you're in this back and forth because something about this decision or something about this desire to feel more confident in this area of your life is encouraging you to take action, right? But something gets you stuck. Usually indecision is also really rooted in some fear. And you have to get really curious, what is that fear here, right? What is keeping me stuck and not making this move forward? This next barrier is that we forget our resiliency or how strong we are. So that's a common theme I noticed with people who struggle with confidence. They doubt themselves, don't feel really good. They also, again, picture this worst case scenario and they always kind of default to like, oh, I can never handle that. I would be crushed. I wouldn't be able to move through that. They really doubt themselves. And the reality is that they forget that they've actually survived, and at times not only survived, but thrived through everything they've gone to up to this point. So that's the thing. It's like this amnesia that we have where we can only look at one side of the equation and we forget the other side, right? We forget that we've actually been able to move through things, that we have built-in skills or strengths, and we might not be able to recognize that because our negative thoughts get so loud, but they're there because if I look at your lived experience, you've done something to get to the point where you are. So I think that's something to really highlight. It's noticing at times when you get stuck in this inaction or when you get stuck feeling less about yourself. It's also acknowledging like you're only looking or recognizing one side of the equation. There's much more to the story, that you've actually been able to move through much more. So this period is all about letting other people's voices drown out your own. So this is a common thing. When you feel less than, when you doubt yourself, when you're unsure, it might be really tempting to kind of default to reassurance and like feeling like other people's opinions about your life matter than your own, or letting their opinions guide your decisions, even if there's a part of you that doesn't really feel like it's right. And so that's the thing. You let other people's voice, especially if you have people in your life that have really loud or big personality or big voices, drown out your own voice. And listen, that might not always be wrong. Sometimes that's super helpful. We all thrive from getting feedback at times, but it's really when we notice this pattern that we don't really trust ourselves, or we're not giving ourselves the practice of learning, like, how can I tune into what do I want? Like, what does the little voice inside of me tell me what's right? But if I get all anxious and I start to feel unsure, I don't know what my voice is and I need the perfect answer, it's also being able to tune into like, I'm going to make a decision, see what happens. And even if it's wrong, what a great practice in being able to learn and trust yourself and know that that's okay, right? Because again, it doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. That's fine. But at least you have that practice of like, well, I made a decision. I trusted myself and I moved forward. If it didn't work out, that's okay. At least I learned something from the process, or I learned where I got stuck. I learned more about myself instead of just defaulting to other people's opinions or their voices because they're bigger or louder. The more you can recognize these different barriers, the better you're going to be at handling them, right? Because the first thing in order to change patterns is you have to acknowledge and notice when they're there. You have to notice not only from a macro level, but you also have to notice in all these small little moments when they get you stuck, right? Whether it's the confidence to apply for a promotion, or whether it's the confidence to set a limit or a boundary with a family member, or whether it's just trusting that you know what's right for yourself and starting to put yourself out there in a work event, dating, whatever that looks like, is you have to notice how all these tiny little barriers could show up in these minor little moments for you so that you can start to do something different. Like once you can notice it, like, oh, there's perfectionism, or like, oh, that's where I'm getting stuck by my worries again. And then we can start to figure out what you need to do different. If this is something that you want more support, accountability, be a part of an environment that's really helpful for you, sign up for my emails below, because I'm going to be sharing about this exciting thing I'm doing in the next couple weeks. And you're only going to hear about it first in my email. It's a beta thing. I'm not going to let perfectionism stop me or hold me back, but I'm really excited to do this in 2025. So sign up for my emails below so that you can be the first one that hears about it. And like I always say, I encourage you to continue nurturing your mind, body, and soul, whatever that looks like for you. Thanks, guys.